Michael had always believed love was something steady, something you could rely on. When he first met Emily, it felt like his life had finally aligned with the dream he carried since his 20s. She was bright, warm, and had a laugh that seemed to make everything else fade into the background. They built a rhythm together: dinners at cozy restaurants, long drives through the countryside, lazy Sundays on the couch with coffee and soft music. For 3 years, Michael thought he had found his forever. But as time passed, small changes began to grow into heavy silences. At first, Michael didn't notice much. Emily had always been busy with her career, but now she was busier. She canceled plans, often saying, "Work's just too much right now." He believed her. After all, everyone had stressful weeks, but those weeks stretched into months. Michael began to feel something was slipping between them. He tried not to dwell on it, telling himself relationships naturally move through phases. Still, something about her distance unsettled him. When they went out to dinner, she spent more time checking her phone than talking. When he tried to share stories about his day, her responses were short, polite, but detached. He would laugh at his own little mishaps at work, hoping she'd join in. But her eyes would drift back to the glowing screen in her hand. One evening, they were supposed to meet at their favorite Italian restaurant. Michael arrived early, ordered a bottle of wine, and waited. Minutes turned into an hour. Finally, she walked in, rushed and distracted, offering a quick smile before apologizing about some last-minute project. She sat across from him, scrolling through emails, barely noticing the effort he had put into choosing the place. They once called their spot. He watched her laugh at a message on her phone, and in that moment, the thought crossed his mind. She's here, but not really with me. Michael brushed it off as stress, but the unease lingered. It wasn't the missed dinners or the short conversations that hurt the most. It was the feeling that her heart was no longer in the same place as his. He remembered the early days when she'd send him small texts in the middle of the day just to say she missed him. Now, days went by without a single message unless he reached out first. One Saturday, he suggested a hike, something they used to love. Emily declined, saying she had errands. So Michael went alone. As he walked through the quiet trails, he replayed their last few months together. He tried to convince himself that this was just a rough patch. Yet deep down, he couldn't ignore how absent she felt, even when sitting right beside him. The real moment of doubt came one Friday night. Michael had planned a simple dinner at home, nothing fancy. Just her favorite pasta and the playlist they used to play during their first year together. He lit candles, set the table, and waited for her to come home. But Emily didn't show up until after 10, walking in with an excuse about staying late with friends. She glanced at the table, smiled faintly, and said, "It's just dinner. Don't worry so much." Then she disappeared into the bedroom, leaving him standing in the glow of candles that suddenly felt more like reminders than romance. That night, Michael lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He thought about how love doesn't always leave with loud arguments or slammed doors. Sometimes it leaves quietly, through small indifferences, through canceled plans, through eyes that no longer light up when they meet yours. He tried to silence the thought, but it echoed in his mind. What if her heart isn't here anymore? Michael wanted to believe in the woman he had fallen for. The one who used to hold his hand tightly, who used to listen to every detail of his day, who used to laugh like they shared a secret no one else could understand. But the distance between them now felt like a growing wall, built not from anger, but from neglect. He didn't know what to do. Should he wait it out, trusting time to heal whatever had gone wrong? Or should he face the possibility that Emily was already halfway out the door emotionally? As the night grew colder, Michael realized this was not just about missed dinners or forgotten texts. It was about the feeling of being invisible to the person you love the most. And though he couldn't admit it fully yet, deep inside he knew when love begins to vanish like this, it rarely returns the same way. That quiet thought, heavy but undeniable, marked the beginning of his doubt. And once doubt enters the heart, it's hard to close the door again. Saturday came with clear skies, and Michael felt hopeful. He wanted to bring back the spark, even if it was just for one evening. He decided to cook Emily's favorite meal, creamy pasta with garlic bread on the side. He cleaned the apartment, dimmed the lights, and lit candles to make everything feel warm and inviting. He imagined the look on her face when she walked in, how she might smile and say, "You did this for me?" That thought alone gave him energy. He set the table, checked the clock, and waited. 7 passed, then 8. By 9, the food had gone cold, and the candles had burned low. He sat at the table with his phone in hand, staring at the door, expecting to hear her key. When Emily finally came home, it was past 10. She dropped her bag on the couch, her tone casual as she explained she had stayed late with friends. Michael gestured toward the table, but she only glanced at it and shrugged. "It's just dinner. Don't make it a big deal," she said, brushing past him. Her words landed heavier than she knew. For Michael, it wasn't about dinner. It was about effort. It was about showing that their time together mattered. He sat down at the table after she went into the bedroom, staring at the untouched plates. In the silence of the apartment, he realized something painful. Neglect could hurt more than anger. That night he lay in bed, awake long after Emily had fallen asleep. He thought about how the silence between them had grown louder than their conversations. She no longer asked him about his day. She no longer cared if he had a good one or a hard one. When he tried to share, her answers were short, distracted, as if his words were background noise. The bond they once had felt like a photograph fading with time. The colors no longer as bright. The next morning, Michael made coffee and tried to talk. He asked her how she was, what she wanted to do for the weekend, if she wanted to take a short trip like they used to. Emily nodded here and there but never looked up from her phone. She scrolled while he spoke, giving him half smiles and ma'am responses. After a while, Michael stopped talking. He sat there quietly, staring into his mug. Realizing that conversations with her had turned into monologues, it was in those small, ordinary moments that the truth pressed down hardest. Love doesn't always disappear in one dramatic scene. Sometimes it fades in silence, in the way someone stops listening, stops noticing, stops caring about the details that once mattered. Michael thought to himself, if she no longer values my words or my time, what's left for us? Later that week, they went out for coffee at a cafe they hadn't visited in months. Michael hoped it would be different, that maybe outside their apartment they could reconnect. He asked her about her work, about the book she had been reading, about things they used to enjoy talking about. But Emily's attention drifted again and again. She laughed at something on her phone, then excused herself to step outside for a call. Michael sat at the table alone, stirring his coffee, watching couples around him leaning close, sharing stories, enjoying each other's company when Emily returned. She looked fresh, smiling, but not at him. She laughed louder at a stranger's passing joke than she had laughed at anything he said in weeks. Michael felt invisible. He was there, but it was as if he no longer mattered. That night, sitting at home, he thought about what relationships are truly built on. Not just attraction, not just shared routines, but the daily choice to care, to listen, to be present. Without that, no amount of history could hold two people together. Michael started noticing how. Emily never mentioned him to her friends anymore. When she went out, she didn't invite him along, didn't say. Michael would love this too. Instead, it felt like she was building a world where he was absent. He didn't need her to shower him with attention, but he needed to feel included, needed to feel like her partner. That emptiness grew heavier with each passing day. He told himself he was strong enough to handle it, but deep inside, he knew that love without presence is not love at all. It is a shadow, a memory of what used to be. As the weeks went on, Michael began to pull back. He stopped suggesting plans, stopped telling her about his small joys, because he already knew she wouldn't listen. He started carrying his silence like armor, but inside he was breaking. He thought of the man he used to be, hopeful, full of energy, eager to surprise her. Now he was someone waiting for scraps of attention. Someone who felt like a guest in his own relationship. And it was then that the harsh question came to him. If the person you love no longer values your time, your words or your effort, are you really in love? Are you just holding on to the idea of it? Michael wasn't ready to answer that question yet. But the silence around him, the quiet neglect that had taken root, was making the answer clearer every day. Michael had always believed relationships were about showing up for one another, in big ways and small. But with Emily, he no longer felt that presence. It wasn't just about canceled dinners or her scrolling through her phone. It was deeper, something harder to ignore. He began to see it in public, in moments when her distance became too clear to deny. One evening, they went to a friend's gathering. Michael expected the comfort of being introduced as her partner, the pride of being by her side. But Emily never once brought him into the conversation. She floated between groups, laughing and chatting, while Michael stood quietly in the background. When someone finally asked, "Oh, and you are?" Emily gave a quick smile, said, "This is Michael," and moved on. It stung not because she didn't say much, but because she didn't say it with the warmth she once did. He wasn't her partner in that room. It was just someone she happened to arrive with. On the drive home, Michael asked if she noticed how quiet he had been. Emily shrugged. "You're just not very social, that's all." But it wasn't about being social. It was about feeling invisible beside the woman who used to make him feel like he was the center of her world. The truth began to weigh on him. Emily no longer asked about his work, his dreams, or his struggles.
Oh.
She used to cheer him on, remind him of his potential, even push him when he doubted himself. Now, when he shared an idea or talked about a project, her reaction was flat. Sometimes she didn't respond at all. It was as if his life had become irrelevant to her. One night, they went out for coffee at a quiet cafe. Michael tried again to bridge the gap. He told her about a new opportunity at work, something that could change his career path. Emily nodded, looked out the window, and then changed the subject to a story about someone she had met recently. Michael listened, but his chest tightened. She had more excitement in her voice for a stranger's story and for his dreams, and then it happened while they were still at the cafe. A man at the next table made a light-hearted joke. Emily laughed loudly, more freely than Michael had heard in months. She leaned forward, engaging with this stranger in a way she hadn't done with him in a long time. Michael sat there, sipping his coffee, feeling like a ghost at his own table. It wasn't about jealousy. It wasn't about the man. It was about the truth reflected back to him. Emily still had energy, still had warmth, still had laughter. But she no longer gave it to him. Walking home, Michael couldn't stop replaying the scene. Love wasn't just about grand gestures. It was about the daily act of choosing each other. Respect, loyalty, and care were the foundation. Without those, love became hollow, a shell of what it once was. That night, Michael stood in front of the mirror in their bedroom. He studied his own reflection, searching for answers. Was he not enough anymore? Was he too demanding? Or was it simply that her heart had moved on? The mirror didn't lie. Showed him a man carrying the weight of being unwanted. Emily came in, scrolling on her phone, barely glancing his way. He wanted to speak, to say what was breaking inside him, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he asked gently, "Do you even notice me anymore?" She looked up, confused. "Of course I do. You're overthinking again." Then she went back to her phone. That answer hit him harder than silence. It wasn't anger, it wasn't cruelty, it was dismissal. She didn't see how deeply he was hurting, or maybe she did and simply didn't care enough to address it. Both possibilities were painful. From that moment on, Michael began to notice everything more clearly. How she never reached for his hand anymore. How she walked ahead of him instead of beside him. How she no longer said goodnight in the way that once made him feel safe. Love had become routine, stripped of meaning. He realized then that he couldn't ignore the truth forever. When someone stops respecting you, when they stop showing up, when they treat your presence as background noise, it is no longer love. It is endurance. And endurance without love only leaves scars. The hardest part wasn't her distance. It was the reflection of himself he saw because of it. He turned into a man who begged for crumbs of attention, a man who kept holding on to something that no longer held him back. Michael understood something vital that night. Staying in a relationship where your value isn't seen doesn't make you loyal, it makes you lost. And though he hadn't made the final decision yet, deep down he knew. If love no longer lives between two people, pretending it does will only destroy what little remains of your own heart. For the first time, he asked himself the question out loud. If she no longer stands beside me, supports me, or respects me, then why am I still here? The silence in the room was his only answer. The breaking point came quietly on a Thursday evening. Michael had spent the day thinking about how to start a real conversation with Emily. How to explain the heaviness that had been sitting on his chest for months. He didn't want to argue. He didn't want to accuse. He simply wanted to be heard. When she walked through the door, he asked if they could talk. She sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, and said, "What now, Michael? You always want to talk about feelings." He swallowed hard, trying to steady his voice. "It's not about feelings. It's about us. I don't know where we are anymore." He told her how invisible he had been feeling, how much he missed the way things used to be. He reminded her of the early days, when they couldn't go an hour without reaching for each other, when laughter came so easily, when their world felt small but full. He admitted he still wanted that, still wanted her, but he couldn't carry the relationship alone. Emily listened halfway, sighing here and there, but her eyes kept drifting back to her phone. Finally, she put it down and said, "You're too sensitive, Michael. Not everything is about you. You make problems where there aren't any." That sentence cut deeper than anything else she had ever said. Michael wasn't asking for the world, he was asking for partnership. To him, love wasn't about everything being about him. It was about everything being about them. It was about standing side by side, valuing each other's words, caring enough to notice when the other was breaking. But Emily didn't see it that way anymore. That night, he stood in front of the mirror again, just like he had weeks earlier. But this time, he didn't search for flaws in himself. Instead, he asked a different question. Why am I allowing myself to stay where love no longer exists? The reflection staring back at him wasn't weak. It was tired of excuses. Tired of waiting for change that never came, tired of being treated like an afterthought. For years, Michael believed love was about fighting for the relationship, about holding on even when things grew hard. But now he understood something he had refused to accept. Staying in a place where you are not valued isn't love. It's self-betrayal. The next morning, Michael made his choice. He didn't shout, he didn't beg, he didn't demand explanations. He sat across from Emily at the breakfast table, his coffee cooling in his hands, and told her calmly, "I think it's time we end this." Emily blinked, surprised but not devastated. She leaned back and asked, "Are you serious?" Michael nodded. "Yes. I can't keep trying to love for both of us. I need to be with someone who sees me, who respects me, who wants to build with me. And that's not what we have anymore." There was no dramatic scene, no desperate plea from her to stay. She simply shrugged, said, "If that's how you feel," and returned to sipping her coffee. Her indifference, more than anything, proved he was making the right choice. When Michael packed his things, he didn't feel anger. He felt an unexpected peace. Every folded shirt, every book lifted from the shelf, felt like reclaiming a piece of himself he had been losing. He wasn't running away. He was walking back to his own worth. As he closed the door behind him, Michael realized something powerful. Leaving wasn't failure. Leaving was strength. It was choosing dignity over neglect, self-respect over silence, truth over illusion. The days that followed were quiet but not empty. He went for long walks, reconnected with friends, and spent time rediscovering what made him feel alive. He thought often about Emily, but not with bitterness. He understood now that people change, and sometimes love doesn't survive that change. But what mattered most was refusing to stay where love no longer lived. Michael knew there would come a day when he would find someone else. Someone who didn't make him question his value. Someone who wouldn't treat his presence like background noise. But until then, he was content with the simple truth. He deserved more than what he had been accepting. For the first time in months, he felt light. Not because the pain had vanished, but because he had finally chosen himself. And in that choice, Michael found the closure he had been searching for all along.